Okay, so I've been waiting for this forever. FedEx sucks, and Alba shipped with FedEx. So we got the from Alba Racing, we got their exhaust tip, which is just basically a really high flow, large screen replacement for the much smaller tip that comes in the factory Yamaha exhaust. I'll do a side-by-side comparison. So you can see right there, already very big difference. And then I got the Alba ECU. I've already got my Airbox spacer installed, and I've already got my air injection deleted, my EGR, or not EGR, charcoal canister deleted, fairly high flow intake. And this computer in this box is supposed to be tuned to match all of that. Now, Alba says if you use their Silent But Deadly kit, and you do their header, their exhaust tip, Airbox spacer, and tune, you get 18 more horsepower, you know, and a lot more area under the curve, a better torque, better drivability. So I need to mail mine back into the core, obviously. I'll show you where this goes in a second. I didn't do the header because I think the header on a stock YXZ is not really justified. I know everyone claims it and has those horsepower charts, but the people claiming you need a header are also the people selling you a $500 header. That is a really pretty factory 3-into-1, fairly equal length header on a motor that's naturally aspirated with about 333 cc's per cylinder. That's a big head pipe. I mean, I don't think you're going to improve much on that. I know Alba says they do, but they're a little biased because they want to sell you a header. So I didn't do the header. We might get there eventually, but I think for now we're just going to do the tune for the Airbox spacer, 4 horsepower. This tip, which is like 4 horsepower. The tune's like 4 horsepower. So I should be getting about 12 horsepower, 10 to 12 more horsepower. But most importantly, they're getting rid of my rev limiter in 5th gear, and it's not going to run so lean. So it should help the throttle be a little smoother. And it doesn't need a ton more power. Like, I just need a little bit more in 2nd gear. The gap from 1st to 2nd gear is pretty high when you get into 2nd gear. Every once in a while, trying to hold a slide or cut a donut or just really rip it, you do feel it bog a little bit in 2nd and 3rd gear. So hopefully this is all I need and I don't need to change anything else. It'll still be pretty quiet. I'm not putting a stupid loud exhaust on there. These things are already loud enough as it is. You almost want to wear earplugs in the cabin as it is. So to get to the computer, you just pop this off, which on mine is a little bit more involved because of the snorkel. You snap it off there. You need to trim this hose clamp. Computer is down here. So last time I removed it, I had a lot of stuff out, had all these plastics off, but that's not 100% necessary. So just grab these little relay guys, pop them out of the way, then you can get to the strap down here, take the strap off, and here's your ECU. So it's got a couple connectors back here, just the ones you push on. Hear the click, push on those, slide it out this way, slide your new one in, mail it back to Alba for your $600 core charge. I need 2 hands to do this, so I'm setting the phone down. But, so we're gonna do that. I'm gonna go rip it around the yard. I'll put the GoPro on. I am about to completely redo my Airbox again for the 2nd time, this time with an Alba spacer and a new Airbox. Those are gonna come in the mail sometime today. I'm sure it's fine right now, but I don't 100% trust it, and I don't wanna mess with the air intake. So I trust it for riding around the yard, but I'm not gonna go submerge it or do a bunch of dust type stuff with the Airbox. Not great with that eBay spacer that doesn't fit quite right. So you'll be working on this thing all day again. It's worth pointing out that I've worked on this thing way more than any Talon I've had. I've only had it for a little while. Now today is mostly adding power, which, one of the reasons I got this is it's a lot easier to add power than the Talon. You can get, 10, 12 horsepower out of it very cheaply. Tune's $300, exhaust tip's $100, Airbox spacer's $100. So like $500, when I say the snorkel, $600. $600 to pick up, 10, 12 horsepower and a lot of other benefits. That's awesome. You can't quite do that on a Talon. There's a lot more potential in this motor than the Talon, right? This is a dual overhead cam 3-cylinder versus a single overhead cam 2-cylinder in the Talon. So this motor is very under stress from the factory as far as its power output. So this was really easy to remove. So first you take off this cone, which is, I think, purely aesthetic. You can see that there's like a gasket in here that's kind of disintegrated. I'm not sure what that's all about. Yeah, so that just sits over it. Hopefully that gasket isn't important. Whatever. That comes off with just 3 Allens, and you can easily get to them all with a little wobble and an Allen socket. And then in here, there's a bunch of 8mm, and then you just pull this guy out. And there is a gasket. I'm sure that's reusable. And then you can see the YXZ exhaust, and there's a catalytic converter in here, obviously. I think that's just chunks of whatever this weird donut gasket thing is. That was kind of sealing up against this guy. But this doesn't have that, so don't think it's gonna matter. I'm sure it's gonna blow all that crap out. But let's do a side-by-side comparison. That's a lot more flow in a lot of different ways. You see this baffling is a really fine screen, and the pipe goes all the way into the back of it. So the air's got kind of a tortuous flow path to go through. This stops here, and of course the diameter is much larger. So yeah, apparently this is also legal and isn't gonna make it that much louder. So that's excellent. Also, obviously use some blue Loctite on any exhaust bolt, or otherwise they'll rattle out, and start everything by hand because exhaust bolts with threads get really dry and rusty, and you don't want to strip one of these out and cause a vibration later on. Okay, so one minor complaint, as you can see, that's not sitting centered, and this is rubbing over here. There was some play in the bolt holes on this guy, so I'm gonna loosen up and move it over some, but that's kind of annoying, Alba. Yeah. I mean, you really could just leave this off. This is just for looks, but it would look pretty shisty without it. So I'm gonna pull this cover back off, loosen up with all those again, and try to straighten it out. After jacking with it, that's the best alignment I can get. There's just a little bit of clearance all the way around, but it's definitely off center. That's with tweaking the 8mm and the Allen bolts with the maximum of clearance they have. So I don't love that. Obviously I can just take a bar in it and bend it over a little bit. Shouldn't have to do that with a $100+ exhaust tip. Come on guys, quality control. I'm getting ridiculously good at pulling the airbox out of the YXZ. This is my 3rd time. First time was Yamaha's fault, second 2 times were my fault. So here's what happens when you put these bigger bolts that come with the eBay airbox spacer. That's the spacer right there in. See how it stressed the plastic right there and cracked it? It's the same story in a lot of different places. So yeah, so this airbox is toast. Replacing it with this brand new airbox. Yeah, whatever, living and learn. Pretty cheap on Partzilla. Don't use this airbox spacer. My Alba one's coming in today. The eBay one's gaskets suck, and the bolts they give you are too fat and too long. Even if you bore it out, it'll still crack. Let me show you the difference between those bolts and the ones that are in their factory. So here's the bolts that the airbox spacer gives you. There's the factory bolt, or screw. Way fatter, way wrong thread pitch for biting into aluminum. Just probably the cheapest screw they could find that would kind of work. So obviously I've got some screws on hand now that are extra because I'm not going to use any of this crap. I contacted the vendor. They said, oh, we're sorry. We'll give you half your money back. Don't bother shipping it to us. Whatever. So pro tip for getting this airbox out, you can remove this center piece of plastic very easily. You just have to kind of undo all the fasteners, then yank it from the center and pop it out the sides. And then take a ratchet strap on your radiator support there over the roll cage down to that mount, holds the radiator up about 1 inch off its mount once you pull that 12mm bolt out, and you can easily get the airbox in and out without a spacer. Without the spacer, it comes out okay. It's kind of twisted inside out that way. With the spacer, can't do that, so just move your radiator out a little way a little bit and it'll come out right here. Makes it way easier to get the airbox in and out. Also, now that I've deleted a lot of vacuum lines, that also makes it easier because I don't have as many vacuum lines to fight with. So now I'm going to take this all apart, transfer all my stuff into that airbox, install my new spacer, and then we're going to go do some test out the tunes on a nice dirt road where we can use a draggy. Hard time getting it apart because I'm an idiot. There is another screw hidden down in here, and if you don't see that screw, you'll be real confused why the airbox doesn't just want to open up. So fortunately I found it out and I was like, what? And I've installed this boot. So as you can see, it's ultra blacked all the way around it. I put ultra black on both sides of the airbox and then in the groove of the boot and pushed it in there. Inside's not as pretty, I need to smooth it out. But see how it looks? It's nice and rectangular. It took a lot of work with a pick, going around and making sure that this boot was fully seated in the airbox. You have to go in here with your fingers and push it and use a pick on the back side here. I also went in through this side with a screwdriver to make sure I pulled that nipple forward. It was fully engaged. And as you can see, that's 100% watertight, son. So that's good to go. Now I got to pull it back together with all the extra gaskets. My airbox spacer should be here any minute. I'm going to add a bunch of dielectric grease to all of these gaskets because they're a nice groove. So even if the gasket leaks a little bit, the dielectric grease will slow the rate of that leak. So we just did the old secondary air injection system delete. It used to mount there and there. Got rid of that. And now we're gonna see if we can leave it disconnected or we're just gonna throw a check engine light. So far, it hasn't thrown a check engine light, but we're gonna have to do some testing. That's the connector right there. I'd like to leave this solenoid off. On the other side, for the evap system, the charcoal canister and stuff, that solenoid, if I unplugged it, it threw a check engine light. So we'll see if we can get away with it. But it looks a lot cleaner here without this growth. And you know, air injection's stupid. You know, it's just to help the catalytic converter be a little more efficient. But the problem is when you start putting a tune and a different exhaust tip, you get a lot of popping and stuff. So definitely cleaned it up in here without this looking at it. You need that cap right there. That's where the air used to come from. So that air would bypass the combustion chamber and be dumped in the exhaust. So you cap that off, and now there's a little more air for the engine to use for oxidation of fuel. It's not gonna make a power difference, I don't think, but I love deleting shit like this. That's the other solenoid I deleted, but I had to plug that one back in. So starting to clean up this mess a little bit, but it's still kind of a rat's nest. 3 or 4 laps around the yard, no check engine light. So I'm just gonna leave this little connector up in this vicinity and zip tie that out of the way, leave the solenoids off. So I tore the front end apart to change this piece. If you look at how this broke, it's a very brittle failure. It didn't fail around the area where it was pushed onto the crush sleeves. The crush sleeve wasn't missing. It really doesn't make any sense to me how or why this failed in such a manner, but whatever. I measured everything. The frame is straight, put a new one in there. It was over torqued a little bit, but I don't know why it would have caused it. I see some wear marks on it from rubbing or something. It just seems like it's shattered. Pretty weird. While I'm in here, I'm playing with this couple other things, so this is trash, but this sway bar is really flimsy. Like, you can bend it with your hand easily, but it does do something. I had it hooked up and I couldn't move the arm very much. I actually had to remove it from the bottom arm in order to get the bushings out and stuff. Another thing, notice looking at this, this thing has some massive ball joints. That's pretty cool. Very nice ball joints. Nice big hardware too. These bolts, you know, a lot beefier than a Can-Am, where they go through there. You know, they're not using little tiny 10mm bolts. Yes, I wish they were the Honda style spherical joints that didn't require greasing, but you know, they are sealed pretty good. And they have grease zerks, and this thing moves very freely. So that's pretty good. That's what it looks like at full down travel, where the axle starts to bind up. So you could crank the sucker down and get some ground clearance if you wanted to, with a little bracket lift action. You can see that's where the shock is holding it, and it can drop down that much farther. So you could lift one of these, I guess. Not the right vehicle for it, but you could do it. Steering tie rod looks pretty good. I don't think it's quite as beefy as the Talon. The Talon, I think, is a little bit heavier duty looking, but better than a Pioneer 1000, that's for sure. I just got my shock bungee corded up out of the way, but not quite as smooth and easy to work on as a Talon. Like, these bolts are kind of tight in here and pretty close together, and the arms are kind of funny. This arm's way forward, this arm's way back, so that's kind of a trip. I just trimmed the skid plate right here to get the bolts out, and again, I trimmed it back here, so I didn't want to pull that big old skid plate off just to change this little washer out.